The Haunting of Montgomery Mansion, an AI-generated horror short story. Chapter 1. The Arrival. The winding road leading up to Montgomery Mansion was surrounded by thick forests that seemed to stretch on forever. The trees towered high above, their branches interlocking to create a dense canopy that blocked out the sun. The leaves rustled softly in the breeze, as if whispering secrets to each other. As Alex drove down the road, he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The mansion loomed ahead, a dark and foreboding presence that seemed to be watching him. The building was massive, with tall columns and a grand entrance that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. Alex parked his car in front of the mansion and got out, taking a deep breath of the fresh forest air. He couldn't help but feel a little intimidated by the grandeur of the mansion, but he reminded himself that he was here to do a job. He walked up the steps and knocked on the door. After a few moments, it creaked open, revealing an old woman with a kind smile. "Welcome, dearie," she said. "I'm Mrs. Jenkins, the caretaker of Montgomery Mansion. You must be Alex." Alex nodded, feeling a sense of relief at the warm welcome. "Yes, I'm Alex. Thank you for having me." Mrs. Jenkins led Alex into the mansion, and he couldn't help but be impressed by the grandeur of the interior. The walls were adorned with intricate wallpaper, and the floors were made of polished marble. The furniture was old but still in excellent condition, and Alex couldn't help but feel like he had stepped back in time. As they walked through the mansion, Mrs. Jenkins told Alex about the history of the building. She talked about the former owner, Mr. Montgomery, and his tragic death. She mentioned the rumors of a haunting, and Alex couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. This was exactly what he had been looking for. After the tour, Mrs. Jenkins led Alex to his room, which was located on the third floor of the mansion. It was a spacious room with a large four-poster bed and a fireplace that crackled with warmth. As Alex settled in, he couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. He was here to investigate the haunting of Montgomery Mansion, and he knew that this was going to be a fascinating and potentially dangerous journey. Chapter 2. The First Encounter. As the sun set over the forest, Alex's excitement began to turn into nervousness. He knew that the night ahead would be filled with potential dangers, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. He checked his equipment, making sure that he had everything he needed for the investigation. As the darkness fell, Alex made his way to the main hall. He set up his equipment, including cameras, voice recorders, and EMF meters. He settled in, waiting for any signs of paranormal activity. The mansion was quiet, except for the soft sound of the wind outside. Alex waited for hours, but nothing happened. He was just about to pack up when he heard a soft whisper. At first, Alex thought it was his imagination playing tricks on him, but then he heard it again. He turned on his recorder, hoping to capture any sounds. As he listened closely, he heard a faint voice whispering his name. Alex felt a chill run down his spine, but he kept his composure. He followed the sound, moving deeper into the mansion. The whispers grew louder, and Alex could feel a presence around him. He turned on his EMF meter, and the readings were off the charts. As he walked, the whispers turned into moans and groans. The mansion felt like it was alive, and Alex couldn't help but feel like he was being watched. He followed the sounds until he came to a closed door. The door was old and creaky, and Alex hesitated before opening it. He took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Inside the room, Alex saw a figure standing in the shadows. He couldn't make out the face, but he could feel the intense gaze of the figure. He took a step forward, but the figure vanished into thin air. Alex was left standing in the room, feeling a sense of dread wash over him. He knew that he had encountered something otherworldly, and he couldn't help but feel like he was in over his head. He quickly packed up his equipment and made his way back to his room, vowing to be more prepared for the next encounter. Chapter 3. The Haunting continues. Alex didn't sleep well that night. The encounter with the figure had left him feeling uneasy, and he couldn't shake off the feeling that he was being watched. The next morning, he woke up early and decided to explore the mansion during daylight hours. As he walked around the mansion, Alex noticed that some of the rooms were colder than others. He also noticed that some of the furniture had been moved, even though he was the only one in the mansion. He took pictures and notes, hoping to capture any evidence of paranormal activity. As the sun began to set, Alex made his way back to the main hall to set up his equipment. He decided to focus on the room where he had encountered the figure the night before. He set up his cameras and EMF meters and settled in for the night. The mansion was quiet, except for the occasional creaking of the old wood. Alex waited for hours, but nothing happened. He was just about to give up when he heard a soft rustling sound. He turned on his camera, hoping to capture any movement. As he watched the camera feed, he saw a chair move by itself. The chair moved slowly, as if someone was pushing it. Alex was stunned. He had never seen anything like this before. He watched the camera feed as the chair continued to move. Then, suddenly, it stopped. Alex couldn't believe what he had just seen. He reviewed the footage, hoping to find some explanation, but he couldn't find anything. As the night went on, Alex experienced more paranormal activity. He heard voices, footsteps, and even felt someone touch his shoulder. He was terrified, but he knew that he had to stay calm and document everything. The night seemed to last forever, but eventually the sun began to rise. Alex packed up his equipment and headed back to his room. He knew that he had captured some incredible evidence, but he also knew that he had to come back and investigate further. As he lay in bed, Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. He knew that the haunting was far from over, and he had a feeling that things were only going to get worse. Chapter 4: The Unsettling Truth. Alex returned to the mansion a few days later, armed with his equipment and a determination to uncover the truth about the haunting. As he walked through the old halls, he couldn't shake off the feeling that he was being watched. He set up his cameras and EMF meters and began his investigation. The first few nights were uneventful. Alex spent hours sitting in the main hall waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. It was almost as if the spirits had disappeared. But just when Alex was about to give up, strange things started to happen. He heard knocking on the walls, saw shadows moving in the corners of his eye, and felt a cold breeze blow past him. One night, Alex woke up to find that all of his equipment had been moved. The cameras had been knocked over, the EMF meters had been reset, and his notes had been scattered on the floor. Alex reviewed the footage from the previous nights, hoping to find some explanation, but what he saw made his blood run cold. There was a figure in the footage, a shadowy form that seemed to move around the room. Alex couldn't believe it. He had never seen anything like this before. He spent hours reviewing the footage, trying to figure out what the figure was, and then he found it. There was a hidden room in the mansion, a room that he had missed during his previous investigation. Alex made his way to the hidden room, his heart racing with anticipation. As he opened the door, he was hit with a cold gust of wind. The room was dark and musty, with cobwebs hanging from the ceiling. And then, he saw it. The figure from the footage was standing in the corner, its shadowy form pulsating in the dim light. Alex raised his camera, hoping to capture some evidence of the spirit. But then, the figure began to move. It floated towards Alex, its shadowy tendrils reaching out towards him. Alex tried to back away, but he was trapped. The figure was too close. And then it spoke. Its voice was a whisper, a rasping sound that seemed to come from all around him. "Leave this place," it said. "This is not your home. You do not belong here." Alex was terrified. He backed away slowly, his camera still raised. And then, the figure was gone. Alex was alone in the hidden room, surrounded by darkness and the musty smell of old wood. He knew then that he had uncovered the truth about the mansion. It was haunted, and the spirits did not want him there. Alex left the mansion that night, his mind racing with thoughts of the supernatural. Chapter 5: The Final Confrontation. Alex couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that had settled in his gut after his encounter with the spirit in the hidden room. He knew he had to do something to resolve the haunting and find peace for the restless spirits. He decided to seek the help of a psychic medium, someone who could communicate with the dead and help him understand the spirit's motivations. After a few days of searching, Alex found an experienced medium named Samantha. She agreed to meet him at the mansion and help him put the spirits to rest. As they walked through the halls of the mansion, Samantha told Alex that she sensed a great deal of pain and sadness in the house. She explained that the spirits were trapped there because of some unresolved trauma or injustice that had happened in the past. Samantha led Alex to the hidden room where he had encountered the spirit. She closed her eyes and began to concentrate, trying to make contact with the spirit. After a few moments, Samantha's eyes snapped open. "I've made contact," she said. "The spirit is here." Alex raised his camera, ready to document any evidence of the supernatural. Samantha began to speak, her voice low and urgent. "Spirit, why are you here? What do you want?" There was a moment of silence, and then a voice answered. It was the same voice that Alex had heard in the hidden room, a whispery, rasping sound. "We are trapped," the voice said. "We cannot move on until our justice is served." Samantha nodded, her eyes still closed. "What kind of justice do you seek?" she asked. "The man who killed us," the voice said. "He must pay for his crime." Alex felt a shiver run down his spine. He knew then that he had to find out what had happened in the mansion and who had been responsible for the spirit's deaths. He spent the next few days researching the history of the mansion, digging through old records and newspaper articles, and finally he found it. A man named Edward, the previous owner of the mansion, had been convicted of murder. It all made sense now. Edward had killed the people who had once lived in the mansion, and their spirits were trapped there, seeking justice for their deaths. Armed with this knowledge, Alex and Samantha returned to the hidden room, ready to confront the spirits once and for all. "Spirits," Samantha said, her voice clear and strong. "We know what happened. We know who was responsible for your deaths." There was a moment of silence, and then the voice spoke again. "Who?" it said. "Tell us who did this to us." "Edward," Alex said, his voice trembling slightly. "Edward was responsible for your deaths." There was a pause, and then the voice spoke again. "Edward," it said, almost as if the name were a curse. And then the spirits were gone. The mansion was silent, as if the spirits had finally found peace. Alex and Samantha left the mansion, knowing that they had finally put the spirits to rest. But as they walked away, Alex couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. The mansion, once a place of terror and horror, was now forever tainted by the memory of the spirits who had once haunted it. Chapter 6, Closure. Alex stood outside the mansion, staring up at its imposing facade. It looked different now, somehow less ominous, as if the weight of the spirit's pain had lifted. He had come a long way since his first visit to the mansion. He had faced his fears, confronted the supernatural, and put the spirits to rest. But there was still one thing left to do. He walked up the steps to the front door and knocked. A woman answered, looking surprised to see him. "Hi, I'm Alex," he said. "I'm a paranormal investigator. I was wondering if I could speak to you about your father." The woman looked wary, but she nodded and led him into the mansion. They sat in the living room facing each other across a coffee table. Alex took a deep breath. "Your father was responsible for the deaths of the people who once lived in this mansion," he said. The woman's face paled, and she looked away. "I know," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was arrested and convicted. He died in prison." "I'm sorry," Alex said. "I know this must be difficult for you to hear." The woman shook her head. "It's not that," she said. "I always knew my father was a violent man. He was abusive to my mother, to me, but I never knew the extent of what he had done." Alex nodded, understanding the woman's pain. "I came here to tell you that I've put the spirits to rest," he said. "They were seeking justice, and now they've found it." The woman looked up, her eyes wide. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for doing that. It means a lot to me." Alex stood up, ready to leave. But then he hesitated, looking back at the woman. "There's one more thing," he said. "I know this might sound strange, but I think the spirits wanted me to give you something." He pulled out the locket that he had found in the hidden room and handed it to the woman. She took it, turning it over in her hands. "I don't understand," she said. Alex shrugged. "I think the spirits wanted you to have it," he said. "Maybe it belonged to someone who died here. Maybe it will give you some closure." The woman looked at him, and for a moment, Alex saw something in her eyes. Gratitude, maybe, or relief. Closure. He turned and walked out of the mansion, feeling a sense of satisfaction that he had never felt before. He had helped the spirits find peace, and in doing so, he had helped the living find closure. As he walked away from the mansion, he knew that he would never forget the ghosts that had once haunted it. But he also knew that they were finally at rest, and that he had played a small part in their journey to the other side.